Welcome back to Train Signal. You are watching the video for Lab 4, Active Directory, Backup and Restore Techniques. In this video, you will learn how to back up the Active Directory, and then you will notice that there are different methods of restoration of Active Directory. So you'll select the appropriate method. The two methods are non-authoritative and authoritative restore, and I'll tell you exactly what the differences between the two methods are. And then we will actually perform live labs. The first time we will perform a non-authoritative restore, and you will see the problems associated with it, and then we will perform an authoritative restore to get back the Active Directory on our domain controllers. So let's first talk about the backing up process of the Active Directory itself. I'm going to minimize this screen and connect you to domain controller 1. So let's make a connection to DC1. In our network, we have two domain controllers, DC1 and DC2. In order to back up the Active Directory, what you need to do is run the backup tool known as the Windows 2000 backup. And that can be run from Start, Programs, Accessories, and then going to System Tools, and then start the backup process from here. So I'm going to click on the backup button over here, and this brings up the Active Directory, the Windows 2000 backup tool. It is this backup tool that is used to back up the Active Directory. So that's one way to start this particular program. The other way, and perhaps the more popular way of starting this program, is by clicking on Start, Run, and then typing NT backup, and then click on the OK button, and this starts the Windows 2000 backup tool as well. Okay. Now, this tool can be run through the wizard method. In other words, I can click on this particular button over here, and it will start the backup wizard, and will take me step by step as to take me through all the steps that are required to back up whatever I need to back up, files, folders, the entire hard disk, or just the Active Directory on this particular computer. Then the same process for restore. I need to actually follow the steps and then perform the restore using this method. It also lets me create an emergency repair disk that lets me start the computer in case the Windows installation is damaged. Or what you can do is not use these wizards and go straight to the backup tab, and over there select exactly what you would like to back up, or go to the restore tab and select exactly what you would like to restore, and then perform the steps from there. You can also schedule jobs so that your backups are automated and they're scheduled to start at certain times of the day or of the week. Okay, so we're going to go through all these settings. To begin with, let's first talk about the Active Directory and what are we exactly trying to back up. If you recall, the way Active Directory was installed was we ran the DC Promo tool, and what it did was it created a bunch of folders in the C drive. And if you recall, the folder that was created at the time of installation was WinNT, and in there it created several folders. These folders are hidden because they are the operating system folders, and over here there are several folders, including a folder known as sysvol. So all these folders were created for us. One of the most important folders where most of the commands for Active Directory and for the Windows operating system lies is the System32 folder, and I'm sure you visited this before in the past, where you had to actually look up a certain program from there. Okay. So these are the different folders that were created. Here's the sysvol folder that contains the Active Directory policies. In fact, in there's a folder called sysvol, and there's a folder for benandbrady.com, and I can keep navigating this until I find the policies that I need. So these are the two default policies given to us, and these policies are discussed in Lab 14. But when I say that you need to back up the Active Directory, what we need to do is back up all these different settings and the changes that were made to the Active Directory as part of our installation, as well as when we create new users and groups. So it is important to note that even though we use most of the tools from the admin tools over here to actually use the Active Directory, there is no such tool called Active Directory Backup that will back up all our users and computers and groups and all the other policies that we've created on our domain. In order to back up the Active Directory, what you actually need to do is, and that's going to be my next screen, back up what is known as the system state data. This consists of the registry of this computer, which is basically the settings of all the applications and the operating system on this computer itself, including the Active Directory. Then the system state data also includes what is known as the COMP+ class registration database, which is the registration database of all the devices that are running on this computer, the system boot files that are necessary in order to start the computer properly, all the files protected by the Windows file protection system. Once again, if you're running an operating system, you can't run a file that's already loaded in memory. So this particular system state data actually captures those files as well. The certificate services database, if you're running certificate services on this computer, those certificates are important. Otherwise, the users will no longer be able to authenticate or access their data. It also loads up what is known as the IIS metabase. IIS stands over here for Internet Information Services, And the metabase is like the registry for the Internet Information Server. So if you're running the IIS server, that can also, the settings of that is also backed up as part of the system state. And then of course the Active Directory components and a sysvol folder that I just showed you, which is on a domain controller. So every time you back up the system state, it backs up a combination of these settings and files, and they have to be backed up as a group, because just backing up the Active Directory without actually backing up these different settings actually makes no sense. All these settings, the registry, the IIS metabase, the certificate services, and the Active Directory components, such as sysvol, run in tandem with each other. So in order to back up the Active Directory, what you actually need to do is back up the system state data. That's the point I was trying to make. Okay, you do not have a separate Active Directory backup tool. In fact, to back up the registry, just the registry on a computer, you still need to back up the system state data, because the registry by itself does not have all the settings for you to be able to restore the backup and then perform the activities like it was before. So let's go ahead and start backing up our system state data. In order to do that, we need to go to any of our computers, but what I'm going to do is the following. So that I can make a lab out of this process, what we will do is first go to DC1. So currently I'm on DC1, and in there what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Active Directory users and computers and create a couple of OUs, and then I'm going to create a user that will be a test user. So what I'm going to do is in the benandbrady.com over here, I'm going to create a new OU, organizational unit, for the North Carolina site of benandbrady.com, namely NC. So I've created an OU called North Carolina. In this OU, I'm going to create another organizational unit, and I'm going to call that organizational unit sales. So here we go. I'm going to click on the OK button. And then over here in the sales, I'm going to create a new user. So let's right click on this, new user, and let's call this user Robert Stevens, and then the username will be R Stevens. And then what I'm going to do is select a password with a capital P, password number 1. So once again I'm typing password with the number 1 at the end, and the P is capitalized. So once again, capital P-A-S-S, let's do this again, capital P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D 1, and then we'll keep the other settings the way it is and then finish this process. Those of you who are following these labs from lab 14, so if your computer was already ready in lab 14, you do not need to do the steps. North Carolina and sales is already created for you. All you have to do is create a new user called Robert Stevens that I'm going to use for our backup purposes. So I created this user on DC1, and let's make sure that we have connectivity in our network. So what I'm going to do is close Active Directory on users and computers on DC1 and make a connection to domain controller 2. And then over here, what we're going to do is replicate our domain. So what I'm going to do is use Active Directory sites and services like I showed you in the previous video. And then over here, we're going to expand this until I find my domain controllers. So here are our 2 domain controllers. I'm going to click on the first one, and I'm going to replicate from DC2 to DC1. So let's start the process. Successful replication, and let's do this again from DC1 to DC2. Replicate now. Replication was successful. Now I can close this box. Now, while I'm still on DC2, let me start Active Directory users and computers and see whether I got my objects that are created wonderful in a DC1, also in DC2. Okay, what I'm going to do is perform most of the activities of backup and restore on the second domain controller of the Active Directory, because you will notice that if you have more than 1 domain controllers in the Active Directory, the type of restoration becomes extremely significant. So this is where our second domain controller actually comes in as part of this lab series. So I'm going to close Active Directory. I just want you to know that at this point in the Active Directory, we have an OU called North Carolina, in which there is an OU called sales, which has a user Robert Stevens. So when I perform a backup now, I'm going to be backing up all these objects in our Active Directory. So on DC2, let's run the backup tool. So I'm going to click on Start Run and then type over here NT backup. And this will again start the Windows 2000 backup tool, and it will offer us to either use a wizard or do the steps manually. So what I'm going to do is go to the manual step of backing up over here, and then over here, just to give you an idea as to how to use this tool, you can back up anything you want by selecting the item on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side you'll see the details. This is very similar to the Windows Explorer 2 pane look, where on the left hand side I do the navigation and on the right hand side I can see the details. So for example, let's take some examples over here. I'm going to expand the C drive, so to do that I'm going to click on the plus button over here, and then let's say I would like to back up a folder called tools. So I'm going to select this, and you see the blue checkbox over here. If I select this folder, I get to see the details of this folder over here. Now I do not have to back up the entire folder. What I can also do is choose to back up certain files. So let's see what I'm going to do over here. I'm going to back up this file and the sysprep file that we used. So I'm backing up the readme.txt file and the sysprep file. And notice over here what it did was it put a checkbox, but this time it is not blue, it is grayed out, letting me know that I'm backing up this folder, but not all the files in this folder, but only certain files. So in this manner you can select exactly what you need to back up. I'm going to deselect this, and if I would like to back up the entire C drive, I'm going to click on this checkbox. Okay, so that's not what we want to do. What we would like to do is back up what is known as the system state data. So let's do that. I'm going to click on this thing called the system state data, select it, and as you can see over here, these are the different components of the system state data like we discussed that's going to back up. Okay, on the on a domain controller, you will also see these items called Active Directory and sysvolve. On a regular computer, namely a server, a standalone server, or a Windows 2000 professional machine, you will not see Active Directory and sysvolve because it does not have the Active Directory on it. So these are the files that are going to be backed up. Now, next thing I need to tell it is where to back it up to. By default, it is selected the A drive, my floppy drive. And again, as I'm sure you know this, that the floppy disk has a capacity of 1.44 megabytes. This is going to be at least 200 megabytes. Okay, we'll check that out. So I cannot back it up to the floppy disk. So what I'm going to do is click on the browse button over here. And in our C drive, what we will do is create a folder. We're going to create a new folder, and let's call it AD backup, just to organize our work better over here. Typically, you would be backing up to an external device, not on the hard disk itself, but for the purposes of this lab, let's do that. And then over here, I'm just going to use the word backup, and it's going to put the extension .bkf for me. Okay, so we're going to use the word backup over here. Click on open. So what I've done is I've given the folder location and the name of the file to back it up to, and now I can start my backup by clicking on this backup button. And now I have several choices. I can actually schedule a backup, and it's saying that if you would like to do that, make sure you save your settings so far, and I'm going to call it backup again. Save it so I can show you how it can be scheduled as well. If you would like to schedule, I need to log into my domain. By the way, who can perform this backup? Anybody who is a member of the backup operators group, or who's an administrator, such as a domain admin or an enterprise admin, can perform a backup operation. So I can, I'm sorry, that went by too quickly. I had clicked on the schedule button, and over here I can start scheduling. I can click on the properties and then schedule the task exactly the way I want. If I want to do it weekly, I can select that, pick the days of the week, the time, and so forth. If I click on the settings button, I can also say that, well, if the task is not scheduled to run once again, make sure that you delete the task from the task from these settings. The Windows Task Management Service is actually used to perform the scheduling of the tasks. So just to give you an idea that you can also perform this step and schedule it so that the same steps are performed for you on a regular routine. Clicking on the advanced button gives me some other choices. One of the choices over here is verify data after backup. That may be a good idea if you would like to perform that. And it will also back up all the protected operating system files and the system state, which actually we want. The different types of backups. I will not go through the details in this. This was done in the Windows Server 2003 video, but there are different types of backups. The normal backup will basically copy all the files. Then there are other backups called incremental and differential, which basically backs up certain files depending on what type of backup you performed last. What the advantage of incremental and differential is the fact that the backups do not take that long. The backups go very quickly, but the disadvantage is that when you're performing a restore, then what you need to do is not just put the last backup, but you need to put a series of the previous backup tapes in order for you to be able to restore everything. So what you're going to do is perform a normal backup. Then there's what is known as a copy operation, which simply copies the files without putting any flags as to what was copied, so that you can copy these files again and again. And then there's a daily backup which will basically copy all the files that were changed that day. And administrators use a combination of these so that they have confidence in the sets of backups that they're going to perform. In our case, what we're going to say is that please back up everything, so I'm going to leave it as normal and then click on the OK button. So just to show you that you can click on the advanced button and then start this process as well. So I'm going to cancel out, and let's start this one more time. I'm going to click on Start Backup, and this time I will not go to the Schedule or the Advanced button, but what I'm going to do is click on the Start Backup button over here. It's going to do an inventory of the files for me, and once that is done, it will give me some good indications as to how long this backup process will take. So what we're going to do is pause the video over here. Once we get a good estimate as to what it's going to do, here we go. It's going to be about, let's say, 291 megabytes. So about 300 megabytes is how big the system state is, which also includes the Active Directory, by the way. And again, this will vary. If you have hundreds of users and groups and other settings on this computer, including applications, then obviously the size of this will be much higher or much lower, again, depending on what has been installed. But typically, it's about 250 megabytes, if not more. This is going to take a few minutes. So what I'm going to do is pause the video. As soon as this is done, then I'll take it up from there. Welcome back. The backup of Active Directory just concluded, and it took about 6 minutes and 18 seconds. If you click on the report button, it will tell you the details as to what was backed up, how much, and so forth. Here we go, about 268 megabytes, 1762 files. All right, so I'm going to click on the close button, and let's get out of this tool now. We'll click on close also, and now let's do the following. Let's first observe. So on DC2, we had created a folder called AD backup on the C drive. Here's it. I'm sorry, I went to the tools folder. Here's the folder called AD backup, and here's the backup file that was created as part of this process. Now what I'm going to do is the following, so that we can simulate a scenario, and then I can show you the different methods of restoration. So Active Directory has been backed up successfully. Now what I'm going to do is perform the following activity. What I'm going to do is go to Active Directory users and computers, and in there I'm going to deliberately delete the user account that we just created. So Robert Stevens, I'm going to delete it. So there we go, the account is deleted. And then what I'm going to do is make sure that replication informs DC1 also that this particular account has been deleted, and the user account is now out of our benandbrady.com network. So going to sites and services here, I'm going to replicate from either of those domain controllers. Okay, successful. And now I'm going to replicate from DC1 to DC2. Successful too. Now let's verify that the user does not exist on DC1 as well. So what I'm going to do is change the connection over here to DC1, and then go to Active Directory users and computers. And on DC1 also, we should observe that we should have the OUs North Carolina in sales. However, the user account is gone. Okay, so we have successfully deleted the user Robert Stevens from our domain. And the reason I'm doing this is to show you the differences between authoritative and non-authoritative restore. So let's recap what we've done so far. What we did was we created a user called R Stevens, and then we performed a backup of Active Directory on DC2. And DC2 has a backup of the Active Directory, so that the user R Stevens is part of it. And then later, after the backup was done, what I did was I went and deleted the user account and replicated the two domain controllers to make sure that the user has been deleted from all the domain controllers. Now, let's say this were to happen by accident. So in other words, one fine morning, you accidentally deleted a number of users from a certain OU, and now what you would like to do is restore those users from backup. Okay, in order to do that, you need to perform a restore. Now, because Active Directory is a database, you cannot perform a restore to a database while the database is running. So what you need to do is shut down DC2. I'm going to do these activities on DC2. So I'm going to shut down DC2 and restart DC2 in a mode in which the server is running, but the Active Directory itself, the Active Directory database is not loaded. And that is known as the Directory Services Restore mode. So what I'm going to do is shut this computer down. Okay, once DC2 is shut down, what I'm going to do is restart this computer, and again, you will not see the screens in live in this video, but I'm going to show you what the screen looks like. And I'm going to restart the computer in the Directory Services Restore mode, and we're going to perform what is known as a non-authoritative restore. And I'll explain the differences between the two with the example that I'm doing. So when I restart the computer, what I'm going to do is click on the F8 button so that I go to the advanced settings, and then over there I'm going to select this item called Directory Services Restore mode. This is the mode in which when you start the server in this mode, the Active Directory database is not loaded. And if you recall, when we created Active Directory on these domain controllers, we had selected a password for this restore mode, and the password was Rainbow. So once again, the username is administrator, the password is Rainbow. So give me a few seconds. What I'm going to do is pause this video, restart DC2 in the directory services restore mode, and once the computer is started in the restore mode, we're going to make a connection one more time and perform a restoration of our Active Directory. Welcome back. DC2 just started in the directory services restore mode, so let's make our connection. So I'm going to go and select DC2 over here, and as you can see, it looks like a safe mode screen, so that it does not load all the drivers that is required. And now over here I'm going to type the word Rainbow. It just loads the essential drivers. So you'll see the safe mode looking screen, and then over here it's letting you know also that do not expect to do a lot over here. This is a troubleshooting or a repair mode, so to speak. Okay, so you have to start the computer in this mode in order for you to perform a restore. So on DC2, let's perform a restore. So I'm going to click on Start Run, and then over here again type NT backup. It's already typed from before, and now this time we will go to the tab that says Restore. Okay, and then over here I'll expand this until I find what I need to restore. So here's what I need to restore. Where do you want to restore? To the original location, so that we replace the existing Active Directory. And then click on the Start Restore process, and it's warning us that it's going to alter the current state data. In fact, that's exactly what we want. And then it's asking us, do you want to do the advanced, go to the advanced options and see other options, or do you want to just start? So I'm going to say just go ahead and start restoring. Click on the OK button, and this process should start soon. Again, this process will take a few minutes, but while this is happening, let me tell you exactly what's going to take place over here. What we are doing is we're restoring the Active Directory that was backed up. In this particular backup, we had the user account for the user R. Stevens. So what should happen is that once the restoration is done, we will restart a computer in the normal mode. Okay, so we'll just restart DC2. And then once DC2 comes up, what we should expect is that on DC1 and DC2, the user Robert Stevens is restored. Okay, so what I'm going to do is pause the video one more time, let this finish, and once that comes up, we'll verify whether or not the user account Robert Stevens was actually restored. So let me pause the video over here, and I'll join you soon once again. Welcome back. Domain Controller 2 or DC2 just restarted, and I've re-established a connection. So I have successfully restored Active Directory on DC2. This process took about 45 minutes. Now let's verify that this user account actually has come back. In other words, I should expect to find the user account Robert Stevens to be back in the Active Directory. Let's verify that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm in North Carolina sales, and as you can see, R. Stevens has not come back even though I successfully restored Active Directory. Let's verify it on DC1 as well. So I'm going to minimize this connection and now go to DC1. And let's verify this one more time. On DC1, let's go to Active Directory, users and computers, and verify the existence of the user R. Stevens. And again, his account has not been restored even though we successfully performed a restore of the Active Directory. So this may sound a little confusing, but here's what you need to know about the restoration methods. There are two different types of restorations, non-authoritative and authoritative. What we just performed was a non-authoritative restoration. Basically what we did was we backed up, and then when we performed the restore method, we simply told DC2 to actually restore the Active Directory that was in its in a backup folder, and then the domain directory was restored. Now what happens is the following. Remember, this does not exist in a vacuum. There is another server, namely DC1, that is also part of the benandbrady.com domain. So let me explain to you exactly what happened and how can this be corrected. What happened was the following. We restored the Active Directory on Domain Controller 2. At that point, Domain Controller 2 restarted. Once this computer restarted, DC1 saw that DC1 is now coming up, and then the two started the replication process. Here's how it worked. DC1 saw that the domain database on DC2 has an older timestamp and the older update sequence numbers. So what it did was it started replicating from here to over here. Now this is advantages. Remember, let's run this scenario one more time. Let's say that the user account for Robert Stevens was created yesterday, all right, and then you performed a backup last night. This morning, let's say around 11 a.m., the domain controller crashed, and you would like to restore the Active Directory from backup on DC2. Now, you must have performed a lot of activities between the time the office opened up in the morning, let's say 8 a.m. until 11 a.m. Now, if you were to restore the Active Directory on this computer from backup, what will happen is that the Active Directory is restored as of yesterday. So DC1 actually performs the replication process and says that, you know what, the timestamp on your Active Directory is old. Let me give you the latest information that you should be familiar with. And then that information goes from DC1 to DC2. Robert Stevens' account was deleted, let's say 9 a.m. in the morning. So that information also went from DC1 to DC2. DC1 informed DC2 that Robert Stevens' account was actually deleted. I know that you have the account for R. Stevens, but that's old information. Here's the latest information and here's the latest timestamp. So please remove R. Stevens' user account from DC2. Which may sound as a problem, but actually it's a blessing, because if this were not to take place, then all the work that you performed this morning from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. would be lost. For example, let's say you created a bunch of users and created some new policies. Those policies will also be successfully replicated from DC1 to DC2. The problem is that what you want to do is the following. You want to use the best of the two situations. You want certain records to go from DC2 to DC1. In our case, we had accidentally deleted the user account of R. Stevens, and that information you would like to go from DC2 to DC1. All the other information should go from DC1 to DC2 so that DC2 is updated with the latest Active Directory database. So what you want to actually do is flag a record on DC2's backup saying that, you know what, this particular record, for example, Robert Stevens' user account, should be flagged in such a way so that replication takes place for that user account only from DC2 to DC1. Everything else should come from DC1 to DC2. So if this sounds confusing, let's repeat this one more time. By default, when the domain controller 2 comes up, Active Directory will replicate since DC1 was up and running all this time, and the backup of the DC2 has a timestamp from yesterday. Replication will take place from DC1 to DC2, including the information that Robert Stevens' user account is deleted, which is a good thing. But what we want is a certain record, namely R. Stevens' user account, to go from DC2 to DC1. And that can be done by performing what is known as an authoritative restore. So that's the next kind of a restore that we will perform, namely the authoritative restore. The first step is exactly the same. In other words, we perform a restore of the Active Directory. Once we do that, then what we do is after the restore is done, do not restart the server. What you do at that point is go to the command prompt and type some commands in the ntdsutil command line. Once you do that, what will happen is the record for R. Stevens will be flagged with a higher USN number, or the update sequence number, or DC2, and it will actually go from DC2 to DC1. All the other information will come from DC1 to DC2. So let's do that. This is going to be a repeat of what we have done before. So what I'm going to do is quickly shut down DC2 and then restart DC2 in Active Directory Services restore mode. So I'm going to shut this down, and then what I'm going to do is physically start this computer in a Directory Services restore mode and restore the Active Directory one more time by using the steps that I showed you before. Namely, I will select F8 when the computer starts, select Directory Services restore mode, and then go ahead and restore the Active Directory like I did before. So what I'm going to do is pause this video. Once the server DC2 restarts, we're going to do a restoration one more time. This time, after the restoration is done, I will continue the video without restarting DC2 and show you what other steps need to be performed in order to make this restore authoritative. So let me pause the video and I'll join you very soon as DC2 starts. Welcome back. DC2 has restarted, so let's make our connection to domain controller 2. And once again, I'm in the Directory Services restore mode, and you can see that by looking at the word safe mode over here. And let's go and start the backup or rather the restore process one more time using the NT-Backup tool. So I'm going to click on Start Run, and NT-Backup is typed up for me. Again, nothing different over here. The only difference would be when we finish the restore process, what happens next. So I'm going to follow exactly the same steps and then find the system state and start the restore process. It's warning me that it will overwrite it. I'm going to say that's all right. Go ahead and do that. And again, it wants to know where to get the backup from, and that's the location that we had put a backup on. And this should start the restore process one more time. I know I'm being repetitious over here, but I wanted to show you exactly what the restore process looks like, so that if you're performing this activity in a live network, you're not surprised. Those of you who have been responsible for actually backing up and restoring files and folders, let alone Active Directory, know how critical this step can be. So do not be surprised when after you restore, you do not get your data back. Your backup was good, your restore process also worked. It's just that you need to perform a different kind of a restore, also known as the authoritative restore. So let this process finish. As soon as it is done, as I said, I will not shut down this computer. It is critical that we do not do that. So I'm going to finish, let this finish, and then continue from here. Welcome back. The restoration of Active Directory just finished on DC2. So now I'm going to click on the close button, and now this is the critical step. Do you want to restart your computer? You must say no. Typically you say yes to restart the computer so that the Active Directory can be re-established with domain controller 1, but this time you're going to say no, and then close this backup program, and then what you need to do is go to the command prompt. So let's do that. Alrighty, now what I'm going to do is clear my screen a little bit over here and go to the root so we have a better screen. There we go. Now on this screen I'm going to type a series of commands. These commands are what are known as the NTDS utility or NTDS util commands. This command will flag the record for Robert Stevens with a higher USN number. It will, in fact, what it will do is it will make it infinitely high, so that it's always larger in value than what it would expect to be on DC1. So let's see how to do that. To begin with, what you do is you type the command NTDS util and hit enter, and this will take you into a special mode known as the NTDS utility mode. Now over here, what we need to do is perform an authoritative restore. So let's type that. Okay, and then hit enter. Now we are in the authoritative restore mode. Now over here, what we need to inform it is to flag a certain record with a higher USN number, and to do that you use the command restore subtree, because what you're doing is you're restoring a portion of the Active Directory, and then you need to describe the distinguished name of this user. So to describe that, what you're going to type is, and I'm going to explain the syntax over here in just a moment, cn is equal to Robert Stevens, comma, OU equals sales, comma, OU equals North Carolina or NC, comma, DC equals Ben. Now this is where we run into trouble because of the formatting of these lines. So let me see if I can take you to the appropriate portion of the screen. I think we're okay. DC is going to look Ben and Brady, comma, DC equals com, and then I close it with the double quotation marks as well. So there we go. Just to go back to the top of the line. Oops. Sorry about that. Let's do this again. In the attempt to put the screen back to the way it should have been, I lost my. Well, I'm going to start again. Okay, I just lost my my cursor out there. So authoritative restore. Now we're going to say restore subtree, and then type the command one more time. This is the distinguished name of the user. So it's cn equals Robert This is where I ran into trouble last time. Hopefully comma DC equals com. And I'm going to close this with the quotation mark. So let me explain this command to you. The command is restore subtree. And then what we're saying is restore the following user account. CN stands for common name, which is Robert Stevens. That's the username of this user. We'll talk a lot more about these distinguished names in the next video. Then OU equals sales. This is the organizational unit component. So OU equals sales, OU equals North Carolina. And then DC stands for domain component, which is Ben and Brady, comma, DC equals com. This basically is the full location of the user, Robert Stevens. In other words, what we're saying is that there is a user, and the user is denoted by CN, or common name. Common name of the user is Robert Stevens, who is in the sales OU, and this sales OU is in the North Carolina OU, and this is under Ben and Brady under com. Okay, so this is the full name of the user in the Active Directory tree. Just like we have names for files and folders. For example, if there is a file called resume.doc under Word under the folder Word, under the C drive, we would type it as C:/Word/resume.doc. In a similar manner, this is the address or the distinguished name of the user Robert Stevens in the Active Directory tree. Now I'm going to hit enter, and it's asking me, do you actually want to perform an authoritative restore? And this is a critical step. I'm going to say yes over here. And then if my syntax over here is good, which I hope it is, it's just that I was not able to see on the in the far corner of the screen, everything should go okay, and it should say that it has actually flagged it with a higher USN number. So I'm going to click on yes. And now it's trying to open the DID database, which is the ntds.did database, or the database of the Active Directory itself. It's trying to find the record in that Active Directory database that was just restored, and then it will flag it higher up. So let's give it a few seconds, and let's see the message that we get after that. Usually, if you do get an error message over here, it's just that there must be something wrong with the syntax. Be very careful with the syntax. It is tedious to type, especially when you're typing long names. And the other thing that I've noticed also is the fact that, there we go, it found one record to update and it's done. So we were successfully able to update a record. But what I was saying is that I've also found that it's very easy to make a mistake over here. For example, if you put Robert Stevens without a space out here, a lot of times it does not like it. Pay particular attention to the capitalization of these characters, and as long as you're following a consistent policy in the Active Directory, so that you know exactly how user accounts are created and named. For example, in our examples, we've always used first name, last name, and the login name has always been R Stevens, the initial of the first letter of the first name, and then the last name. So having done that, we have successfully done that. Now what we're going to do is quit, and then quit one more time to get back to the command prompt, and now I'll type exit, and I'm out of the command prompt. So the authoritative restore is very similar to the regular restore, known as the non-authoritative restore. The only difference is that after you perform the restore, do not restart the computer. Type the set of commands that I showed you for the appropriate object that you would like to replicate from DC2 to DC1, and then now I can go ahead and shut down the server and then restart it one more time. So it's going to break my connection, which is okay. Our server is going to shut down, and once a connection comes up over here, what we will do is we will go to Active Directory users and computers on DC1 as well as on DC2 if we need to, and then verify that Robert Stevens' user account has come back. So I'm going to pause the video, let server 2 restart, and then join you once again. Well, I'm back again, and domain controller 2 just restarted. So let's verify on DC1 whether the user account Robert Stevens actually has been restored. So let's go to Active Directory users and computers, and if it has not been restored, all we have to do is make sure, well, we don't have to, but if this did not show up over here, all we had to do was go back to Active Directory sites and services and just replicate the domain like we've done in the past, and there we go. Robert Stevens' user account was successfully restored from DC2 to DC1. So this is how you perform what is known as an authoritative restore. Let's recap that. Going back up to our notes over here, what we learned in this video was how to back up the Active Directory. In order to back up the Active Directory, you use the Windows 2000 backup tool. This tool is very similar in Server 2003 as well. So you perform what is known as a system state backup, and the system state data consisted of the registry, the COM class database, including the Active Directory components as well. So you perform a backup. Now, restore is a little tricky. There are actually two different methods of restoration. One of them is called authoritative, and the other is called non-authoritative. Non-authoritative is like a normal restore after the domain controller has been restored in a non-authoritative manner, replication will inform that domain controller of the existence of new records, and those records will go from the domain controllers that were already up and running to the newer domain controller that just came up. In our example, and let's go to our network diagram over here. In our example, DC2 was the one that we restored. So once this came up, a non-authoritative restore made sure that all the replication took place from DC1 to DC2. This is good because the backup that you performed on DC2 was an older backup. In the meantime, things may have changed in the Active Directory, and if that was the case, DC2 now has updated information about the benandbrady.com domain. The disadvantage over here is that if you are trying to restore a record that you accidentally deleted and you would like that record to come back from that backup and then restore back to the other domain controllers, in our case DC1, what you need to do is perform an authoritative restore. An authoritative restore is very similar to a non-authoritative restore, except that you do not restart the server. Instead, after the restore is done, you go to the command prompt and type the ntdsutil commands, and then type a series of commands that will make sure that the record that you're trying to restore has a higher update sequence value, and that when that happens, when that domain controller comes up, replication will go from DC2 to DC1. So those are the two methods of restoration, and you need to decide which one you need to restore depending on the situation in your network. So this should conclude our video on Active Directory backup and restore techniques. I thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you very soon in a different video in Active Directory.